The moment her mother-in-law saw the woman walk through that door, she screamed, "No, you are supposed to be dead." But the woman was not dead. She had been alive for 49 years, mourning the baby she was told had died. That baby was sitting right there in the room, calling the woman who stole him mother. For 28 years, this woman knelt in churches. For 28 years, she crawled to the altars of prophets, native doctors, and hospitals, begging God, begging science, begging anyone who would listen to open her womb and give her a child. For 28 years, her mother-in-law called her barren, cursed, useless, a waste of womanhood. But what was about to be revealed in a small hospital room on a quiet Tuesday afternoon would prove that the real curse was never on Faith. It was on the woman who tormented her. And the secret that would be exposed on that day did not just destroy one family, it destroyed 3 generations of lies. Mama Obiora, the woman who had stood in churches with her hands raised to heaven, pray loudly for a grandchild. The woman who had publicly wept at family meetings about her barren daughter-in-law was now on her knees in that hospital room, not praying, begging. She grabbed the hem of Faith's dress and cried out, "Please, I am begging you. If you expose this, it will not just be me that suffers. Everything will collapse. Everything." Faith looked down at the woman who had made her life a living hell for almost 3 decades. The woman who had called her a barren goat in front of guests. The woman who had told her she was not fit to be called a wife. That same woman was now crying at her feet like a child. Faith's voice was cold when she finally spoke. "You took everything from me. My dignity, my peace, my womanhood. For 28 years, I begged God to forgive me for whatever sin had made me barren. And all along, you knew. You knew. And now I will take everything from you." But before we see what Faith decided that day, before we understand what secret was powerful enough to bring the mighty Mama Obiora to her knees, we must go back. Back to where this story of pain, wickedness, and deception truly began. And before we do, make sure you subscribe to the channel and like this video so you never miss stories like this. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The year was 1996. Faith was 22 years old and she was the pride of Umueze village. She had just finished her diploma in secretarial studies. She came from a good Christian family and her beauty was known throughout the local government. When Chukwuemeka, the only son of the wealthy Obiora family, asked for her hand in marriage, everyone in the village said Faith had won the greatest lottery of her life. Chukwuemeka was a young man in his early 20s, tall, handsome, and already helping his father manage the family's businesses. He had seen Faith at a church harvest Thanksgiving service and had been captivated by her beauty and grace. Within 6 months of meeting her, he had paid her bride price and made her his wife. The wedding was a grand affair. The whole village came out to celebrate. Faith was radiant in her white wedding gown, smiling from ear to ear as she walked beside her new husband. She believed she was stepping into a life of blessing and happiness. But there was one person who did not smile on that wedding day. One person who watched Faith with eyes full of hidden malice. Mama Obiora stood at the edge of the celebration, watching the bride laugh and dance. A village woman approached her and said, "Mama Chukwuemeka, God has blessed you today. Your son has married well. This girl is beautiful and well-trained." Mama Obiora's smile did not reach her eyes when she replied, "Yes, we shall see how blessed we truly are. A woman's worth is not measured by her beauty or her education. It is measured by what comes out of her womb." The village woman looked confused, but Mama Obiora walked away before she could respond. At that moment, nobody understood what Mama Obiora meant by those words. Nobody knew that this elegant, church-going, well-respected woman was hiding a secret so dark, so terrible, that she would spend the next 28 years making sure it never came to light. And the only way to keep that secret buried was to destroy Faith completely. That night, after the wedding festivities, Faith was in the bedroom preparing for her first night as a married woman. She was nervous but happy. Her mother had advised her to be patient, to be respectful, and always to obey her husband and his family. The door suddenly opened without a knock. Mama Obiora walked in as if she owned the room, because in her mind, she did. "Stand up," she commanded. "Let me look at you properly." Faith stood, confused but respectful. She had been taught to honor her elders. Mama Obiora walked around her slowly, examining her body like a farmer examining livestock at the market. "Wide hips," she said. "Good. You should be able to carry children without problems. Turn around."
Faith turned. "My son is my only child," Mama Obiora continued. "I expect a grandchild within 1 year. A male grandchild. Do you understand me?" Faith nodded quickly. "Yes, Mama. By God's grace, it will happen." Mama Obiora grabbed Faith's chin and forced her to look directly into her eyes. "Grace? You think Grace will give me a grandchild? No, you will give me a grandchild. You will work for it. You will make it happen. Because if you do not, if you fail me, I will replace you with someone who can." She released Faith's chin and dropped a small pouch on the bed. "From tomorrow morning, you will drink this with water. Every single morning. It is a fertility mixture. My own mother used it. Her mother before her used it. It works. Do not miss a single day." She turned and walked out without another word, leaving Faith standing there, shaken and confused. That night, Faith told herself that her mother-in-law was just anxious for grandchildren, that there was nothing sinister about a fertility mixture, that everything would be fine once she got pregnant. She did not know it then. She would not know it for 28 long, painful years. But that small pouch, that so-called fertility mixture, would become the chain around her neck. And what was inside it was not medicine. It was betrayal in its purest form. The first year of marriage passed. Faith did everything a good wife was supposed to do. She woke up before dawn to prepare breakfast. She kept the house spotless. She served her husband with joy and served her mother-in-law with fear. Every single morning without fail, she drank the mixture that Mama Obiora prepared for her. She went to church and prayed for children. She fasted every week. She attended night vigils. She did everything right. But month after month, her period came. Month after month, pregnancy tests showed only one line. Month after month, her womb remained empty. On their first wedding anniversary, Mama Obiora organized a small gathering of women from the village. Faith served them drinks and food, trying to be a good hostess. One of the women looked at Faith's flat stomach and smiled. "Ah, Faith, 1 year already. So tell us, is there any good news? Are we expecting a little one soon?" Faith felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. She looked down at her feet and said quietly, "We are trusting God, Ma." Before Faith could say anything else, Mama Obiora let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Trusting God? For 1 whole year you have been trusting God? My dear woman, when a mango tree does not produce fruit after 1 season, the farmer does not keep trusting. The farmer begins to ask questions. The farmer begins to wonder if the tree is cursed." The women murmured among themselves. Faith wanted the ground to swallow her. Mama Obiora was not finished. "Maybe you are not taking the mixture correctly. Maybe you are doing something wrong at night. Maybe there is something you are not telling us. Because a real woman, a complete woman, does not spend 1 whole year in her husband's house without producing a child. Tell me, Faith, what exactly is your purpose in this house if you cannot give my son an heir?" Faith could not respond. Tears burned in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had been taught that a good wife does not cry in public. She had been taught to endure. 2 years passed, then 3, then 5, still no child. Faith went to every hospital in the city. She saw every gynecologist. She underwent every test, and every single doctor told her the same thing. There was nothing wrong with her. Her reproductive system was healthy. Her eggs were fine. Her womb was perfect. There was no medical reason why she could not conceive. Now, some of you might be wondering why the doctors never detected the contraceptives in Faith's system. The answer is simple but tragic. When doctors run fertility tests, they examine the physical organs. They check the womb for fibroids. They check the fallopian tubes for blockages. They check the ovaries for healthy eggs. They test hormone levels. They look for medical abnormalities. What they do not do is test for herbal compounds in the blood. Why would they? What kind of woman trying desperately to have a baby would be secretly taking contraceptives? The doctors never suspected because it made no logical sense. They were looking for problems inside Faith's body when the real problem was in the cup her mother-in-law handed her every morning with a smile. The mixture Mama Obiora gave Faith contained natural plant-based contraceptives, things like pawpaw seed extract and wild carrot. These do not show up in standard fertility tests. They do not appear in hormone panels unless a doctor specifically orders a toxicology screening for herbal contraceptive compounds, which no fertility doctor would ever think to do. The substances remain invisible. And so for 22 years, Faith drank poison while doctors told her she was perfectly healthy. The cruelty was diabolical in its simplicity.
One doctor, a kind elderly man, suggested something that seemed obvious during one of Faith's many visits. "Madam, we have tested you thoroughly, and you are perfectly healthy. For a complete picture, we should also test your husband. Sometimes the issue is not from the woman." Faith brought this suggestion home. She told Chukwuemeka what the doctor had said. But before Chukwuemeka could respond, Mama Obiora stormed into the room. She had been listening at the door. "Test my son? Test my son? Are you mad? The problem is not from my family. My husband had 7 brothers. 7. My son comes from a lineage of fertile men. The problem is from you. It has always been from you. How dare you try to shift blame to my son?" Chukwuemeka looked at his mother, then at his wife, then at the floor. He said quietly, "The doctor does not need to test me. The problem is clearly not from me. Let them do more tests on you. Better tests." Faith opened her mouth to protest, but the look in Mama Obiora's eyes silenced her. This was the moment that should have raised suspicion. This was the moment when a loving husband would have said, "Let us both be tested, just to be sure." But Chukwuemeka refused, and Faith, being a good wife and obedient wife, did not push further. She swallowed her words and her pride. She did not know that her husband's refusal was not just about pride or ego. It was about something his mother had planted deep in his mind since childhood. Mama Obiora had spent years subtly convincing her son that real men do not need to be tested, that suggesting a man might be infertile was the greatest insult, that any fertility problem in a marriage was always the woman's fault. Chukwuemeka had absorbed these beliefs so deeply that questioning them never even occurred to him. But there was something else, something even Chukwuemeka did not know. A secret about a childhood fever, a hospital bed, and a doctor's diagnosis that Mama Obiora had sworn would never see the light of day. The years continued to pass, and with each passing year, the torment grew worse. Year 7, Mama Obiora started bringing young women to the house, introducing them to Chukwuemeka right in front of Faith. "This is Ngozi," she would say. "Her mother had 12 children. She comes from a very fertile family. Maybe she can give you what your wife cannot." Year 10, at family gatherings, Mama Obiora would announce loudly, "Everyone make way for my Barren daughter-in-law." People would laugh. Faith would die inside. Year 12, relatives stopped allowing Faith to carry their babies. "Barrenness is a spirit," they whispered. "It might transfer to our children." Year 15, Faith had tried everything. She had visited churches where pastors poured anointing oil on her stomach. She had gone to native doctors who gave her concoctions that made her sick for days. She had traveled to healing crusades across the country.
nothing worked. And through it all, every single morning, she drank the fertility mixture that Mama Obiora prepared for her. She never missed a day. She believed it was helping. She believed her mother-in-law, despite all the cruelty, wanted grandchildren just as badly as Faith wanted children. One afternoon, in their 15th year of marriage, Faith was on her knees in the backyard grinding pepper on a stone. It was hard work, the kind of work that used to be done by house helps. But Mama Obiora had fired all the house helps years ago. She said Faith needed to work harder, that maybe hard labor would shake her womb awake. Mama Obiora came outside and stood over Faith, blocking the sun. 15 years, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. 15 years of marriage and you have not given me even one miscarriage. At least a miscarriage will show that something is happening inside you. But you, nothing. Your womb is like dry sand. You are not a woman. You are a waste of space. Faith kept grinding, tears flowing freely down her face and mixing with the pepper. Mama Obiora continued. I have told my son many times to take a second wife. He refuses because he is foolish and soft-hearted. He says he loves you. Love? What is love without children? What is a marriage without heirs? But mark my words, Faith, if you do not give me a grandchild soon, I will find a way to remove you from this family, permanently. She kicked doors toward Faith and walked away. That night, Faith locked herself in the bathroom and cried until she had no tears left. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman she did not recognize. A broken woman. A woman who had forgotten how to smile. A woman who had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she really was cursed. She thought about ending it all. The razor was right there. One cut and the pain would stop forever. But something stopped her. A small voice in her head that said, "Not yet. This is not the end of your story." She did not know how right that voice was. In the 22nd year of her marriage, something changed. God sent help from an unexpected direction. A new neighbor moved into the house next door. Her name was Mama Nkechi, a retired nurse in her 60s who had worked in hospitals for over 30 years. She was warm, friendly, and she took an immediate liking to Faith. They started spending time together, cooking, talking, sharing stories. For the first time in years, Faith had someone who listened to her without judgment. One afternoon, as they sat together shelling egusi seeds, Mama Nkechi asked a question that seemed innocent at the time. "My daughter, you said you have been drinking fertility mixtures for how long now?" Faith sighed. "Since my wedding night, 22 years. My mother-in-law prepares it herself." Mama Nkechi's hands stopped moving. Her expression changed to something Faith could not quite read. Concern? Suspicion? Fear? 22 years, Mama Nkechi repeated slowly. "And have you ever had it tested? To know exactly what is inside?" Faith was confused. "Tested? Why would I test it? It is a fertility mixture. My mother-in-law said her own mother used it. It is supposed to help me get pregnant." Mama Nkechi was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was careful, measured. "Faith, in my years as a nurse, I saw many things, many strange things. I saw women who could not conceive for years and years, and then we would discover that someone close to them, someone they trusted, was quietly making sure they never conceived." Faith's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes the enemy is not spiritual. Sometimes the enemy is not a witch in the village or a curse from a jealous relative. Sometimes the enemy is in your kitchen, in your food, in your cup." Faith's hands began to shake. "Mama Nkechi, what are you saying? Are you saying that my mother-in-law—" "I am not accusing anyone," said Mama Nkechi quickly. "I am just saying that after 22 years of drinking something without knowing what is inside, maybe it is time to find out. Knowledge is power, my daughter. You deserve to know exactly what you have been putting in your body." That night, Faith could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while her husband snored beside her. Mama Nkechi's words kept replaying in her mind. Was it possible? Could Mama Obiora, the woman who cried in church about wanting grandchildren, the woman who dragged Faith to fertility clinics and prayer houses, actually be preventing her from getting pregnant? It seemed impossible. It seemed like madness. But then again, nothing else made sense. Every doctor said Faith was healthy. Every test came back normal. Yet, for 22 years, she had not conceived even once. The next morning, Faith made a decision that would change everything. When Mama Obiora gave her the daily cup of fertility mixture, Faith pretended to drink it as usual. She raised the cup to her lips, tilted her head back, and made swallowing sounds. But she did not drink a single drop. She kept it all in her mouth. As soon as Mama Obiora left the room, she spat the mixture into a small container and hid it. For 1 week, she collected the mixture every day. Then she took it to Mama Nkechi, who had connections at a medical laboratory in the city. "Let us see what your mother-in-law has been feeding you," Mama Nkechi said. 7 days later, Faith received a phone call. The lab results were ready. Mama Nkechi told her to come immediately. When Faith arrived at the laboratory, Mama Nkechi was already there, sitting with a scientist in a white coat. The look on their faces told Faith that something was very wrong. The scientist cleared his throat. "Mrs. Faith, we have analyzed the compound you brought to us. This is very disturbing. I must tell you the truth." Faith gripped the arms of her chair. "What did you find? Please tell me." The scientist looked at his notes. "This mixture contains concentrated amounts of Queen Anne's lace seed, wild carrot extract, and pawpaw seed extract. These are all well-known traditional contraceptives. They have been used for centuries to prevent pregnancy." The room started spinning. Faith could not breathe. "Whoever prepared this mixture," the scientist continued, "was not trying to help you get pregnant. They were making absolutely sure that you never would. If you have been drinking this consistently for 22 years, it is actually remarkable that your reproductive system was not permanently damaged." Faith heard a sound, a terrible wailing sound, and then she realized it was coming from her own mouth. 22 years. 22 years of shame. 22 years of being called barren, cursed, useless, incomplete. 22 years of praying, fasting, crying, and begging God for a child. And it was all a lie. Every single moment of it was a carefully constructed lie. The woman who publicly wept for grandchildren was privately making sure those grandchildren would never exist. Mama Nkechi held Faith as she sobbed. "Now you know," she said gently. "Now you have proof. The question is, what will you do with it?" But Faith was not ready to confront anyone, not yet, because even as the shock washed over her, a question burned in her mind. Why? Why would Mama Obiora do this? If she wanted grandchildren so badly, why prevent them from being born? There had to be more to this story. There had to be a deeper secret. Faith went home that evening and looked at Mama Obiora with new eyes. The older woman was sitting in the living room, watching television as if she had not spent 2 decades destroying Faith's life. "Ah, Faith," Mama Obiora said without looking up. "I prepared a fresh batch of the mixture, extra strong this time. It is in the kitchen. Do not forget to drink it before bed." Faith stared at her mother-in-law, seeing the evil clearly for the first time. "Thank you, Mama," she said, her voice steady, despite the rage burning inside her. "You have always taken such good care of me." Mama Obiora finally looked at her, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion? Fear? Faith could not tell. "Of course," Mama Obiora replied. "You are my daughter-in-law. I only want what is best for you." Faith nodded and walked to the kitchen. She poured the mixture down the drain and watched it disappear. From this moment on, she would never drink another drop. And from this moment on, she would begin investigating the woman who had stolen 22 years of her life. The contraceptive mixture explained how Faith had remained childless, but it did not explain why Mama Obiora wanted her to remain childless. This question haunted Faith day and night. Think about it carefully. If Mama Obiora truly wanted grandchildren, she would have let Faith have them. But she did not want grandchildren. Something about grandchildren terrified her.
But what could possibly scare a woman about having grandchildren? Faith thought about this for many sleepless nights before it finally dawned on her. What if Mama Obiora was afraid of what grandchildren might reveal? What if there was something about blood, about family lineage, about DNA that Mama Obiora could not afford to have exposed? Faith began her investigation in secret. She started by asking questions about Mama Obiora's past, careful not to raise suspicion. She discovered something interesting very quickly. Mama Obiora was not originally from this village. She had arrived here in 1975, already married to Mr. Obiora, with a small baby boy named Chukwuemeka. She said they had moved because of family problems in their former village. Faith traveled to Mama Obiora's original village, a place called Umunachi, about 4 hours away. She told her husband she was visiting a prayer mountain for a 1-week retreat. He did not question her. He had stopped paying attention to her movements years ago. In Umunachi village, Faith found an elderly man who was the village chief's assistant in 1975. He was now over 80 years old, but his memory was sharp. He said, "The Obiora family, yes, I remember them well. They left this village in a hurry in 1975. The wife, Mrs. Obiora, arrived with her husband and a small baby boy. They only lived here for a short time before moving away." Faith leaned forward. "You said she arrived with a baby. Do you remember her being pregnant before the baby came?"
The old man's brow furrowed in thought. "That is the strange thing. Now that you mention it, no, I do not remember seeing her pregnant. She was always slim, always moving around, and then suddenly there was a baby. Some people in the village used to whisper about it. They said maybe the child was not truly hers, but nobody dared to ask questions. Her husband was a powerful man, and people feared him." Faith's heart was pounding. "What else do you remember? Why did they leave the village?" The old man looked uncomfortable. "There were rumors, dark rumors, something about a young girl who worked in their house. She disappeared around the same time the baby appeared. People talked, but there was no evidence. And when the Obiora family left, the talk died down." Faith pressed further, but the old man would not say more. He was afraid, even after all these years. But Faith had learnt enough. Mama Obiora had arrived with a baby that nobody saw her carry in her womb. A young girl had disappeared around the same time, and the family had fled the village in a hurry. The pieces of a terrible puzzle were beginning to come together. Faith's next stop was the old village clinic. It had been run by a doctor who died 20 years ago, but his son had taken over the practice and kept all his father's records. Faith introduced herself as a researcher looking into medical records from the 1970s. The doctor's son was helpful. He led her to a dusty storage room filled with old files. "What exactly are you looking for?" he asked. "Anything related to the name Obiora from 1970 to 1975. The doctor's son searched through the files for nearly an hour before he found something. "Here we are," he said, pulling out 2 faded folders. "I have 2 files with the Obiora name. Let me see what is inside." He opened the first folder. "This one is from 1974. A Mrs. Obiora came for fertility treatments, multiple visits over several months. The notes say the treatments were unsuccessful. And here at the bottom, my father wrote a final diagnosis." He paused, reading carefully. "What does it say?" Faith asked, barely able to breathe. The doctor's son looked up at her. "It says, patient confirmed permanently barren due to childhood infection. Chances of natural conception, 0. Faith grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. Mama Obiora was barren. She could not have children. According to this file, no, she could not. But she has a son, Chukwuemeka. He was born in 1975. The doctor's son frowned. "That does not match this medical record. A woman diagnosed as permanently barren in 1974 could not give birth in 1975. It is medically impossible." He opened the second folder. "Let me check this one. This is also from 1975. It is for a baby boy, baby Obiora.
The child was brought in for treatment of severe measles and high fever. He read further and his expression grew troubled. "What is it?" Faith demanded. "The fever was very high. My father's notes say it caused significant damage. He wrote here that the child would likely have fertility challenges as an adult due to the damage from severe measles in infancy." The room tilted. Faith thought she might faint. "Are you saying," she said slowly, "that Chukwuemeka, my husband, has likely been infertile this whole time?" "Based on these records, it is very possible. The damage from severe measles in infancy can cause such problems, and his mother brought him to the hospital. She was present when my father explained the situation. She would have known about this possibility for decades." Faith finally understood the full picture. Mama Obiora could not have children. She was medically barren, which meant she did not give birth to Chukwuemeka. He was not her biological son. And she knew that Chukwuemeka himself likely had fertility problems since he was a baby. She had known for nearly 50 years that her son might not be able to father children.
Now the contraceptives made sense in a twisted way. They were insurance. Even if by some miracle Chukwuemeka could father a child, Mama Obiora made sure Faith would never conceive. Because if a child was ever born, that child's blood could be tested, and a DNA test would reveal the truth. The truth that Mama Obiora had no biological connection to Chukwuemeka. The truth that her entire identity as his mother was built on a lie. She had tortured Faith for 28 years, not because she wanted grandchildren, but because she was terrified of grandchildren. Grandchildren meant blood tests. Blood tests meant DNA. DNA meant exposure, and exposure meant losing everything. But the biggest question remained. If Mama Obiora did not give birth to Chukwuemeka, where did he come from? Whose child was he really? Faith remembered what the old man in Umunachi had said. A young girl who worked in the Obiora house had disappeared around the time the baby appeared. Faith needed to find out what happened to that girl. She returned to Umunachi village and asked around. Most people refused to talk about the Obiora family. The fear from 49 years ago was still strong, but eventually, Faith found someone who would speak. Her name was Mama Ugochi. She was 85 years old, a widow who had lived in Umunachi her entire life. She remembered everything. Faith sat at the old woman's feet and begged her to tell the truth. Mama Ugochi sighed deeply. "The Obiora case, that is a story I will never forget. It is the reason I stopped trusting rich people. What they did to that poor girl." She trailed off, lost in memories. "Please, Mama," Faith pleaded. "I need to know. My whole life depends on this." Mama Ugochi looked at Faith for a long moment, then began to speak. "In 1975, there was a young girl in our village named Chisom. She was only 16 years old, a beautiful girl but very poor. Her family could not afford to keep her in school, so she worked as a house help for wealthy families to survive." Mama Ugochi's voice trembled as she continued. "Chisom got pregnant. Nobody knew who the father was because she refused to say. When her family found out, they were ashamed. They threw her out of their house. She was 16, pregnant, and homeless." Faith listened, her heart breaking for this girl she had never met. "Mrs. Obiora, your mother-in-law, she heard about Chisom's situation. She came to the girl and offered to help. She said she would take Chisom in, feed her, give her a place to stay, and help her through the pregnancy. Everyone thought Mrs. Obiora was being charitable. We all praised her kindness." Mama Ugochi's expression darkened. But she was not being kind. She was planning something wicked. You see, Mrs. Obiora was desperate for a child. Her husband had been threatening to divorce her because she was barren. He said he needed an heir to inherit his wealth. Mrs. Obiora knew that if she did not produce a child somehow, she would lose everything. Faith whispered. "So when she heard about Chisom,
She saw an opportunity, Mama Ogochi confirmed. She took Chisom and hid her in a back room of her house. She kept her there throughout the pregnancy. Nobody saw Chisom for months. Then, one night, Chisom gave birth, a healthy baby boy. Mama Ogochi paused, tears forming in her aged eyes. The very next morning, Chisom was gone. She disappeared completely, and Mrs. Obiora announced to the village that she had given birth to a son. She named him Chukwuemeka, which means God has done great things. Faith could barely speak. She stole the baby. She did more than that. Within 1 week of the baby's birth, the entire Obiora family packed up and moved away. They came to your village where nobody knew the truth, and Chisom, no one ever saw her again. Faith asked the question she feared most. What happened to Chisom? Mama Ogochi's voice dropped to a whisper. There were rumors that Mr. Obiora, your father-in-law, removed the problem permanently. He was a ruthless man. He would not have left a witness alive to tell the story.
Faith covered her mouth in horror. Not only was her mother-in-law a liar and a child thief, she was possibly complicit in murder. But Mama Ogochi was not finished. There is one more thing you should know, the thing that will hurt you most. Faith braced herself. You asked who the father of Chisom's baby was. Why she never revealed his name. Yes, who was he? Mama Ogochi's eyes met Faith's. Chisom was a house help in the Obiora home before she got pregnant. The father of her baby was Mr. Obiora himself, your father-in-law. Faith's entire world collapsed. Mr. Obiora forced himself on his own house help. She was 16, he was over 40. When she got pregnant, his wife saw an opportunity to solve her own barrenness problem. They took the baby, claimed it as their own, and made sure the girl would never talk. Faith understood everything now. Chukwuemeka was the biological son of Mr. Obiora and a teenage house help named Chisom. Mama Obiora was not his mother at all. She had built her entire life on a stolen child and a buried truth. And she had tormented Faith for 28 years to make sure this truth never came to light. Because if Faith had children, those children could be DNA tested. And a DNA test would prove that Mama Obiora had no biological connection to the family she claimed as her own. Her entire identity as a mother, as a grandmother, as the matriarch of the Obiora family would crumble to dust. Faith asked one final question. You said there were rumors that Chisom was killed, but are you certain? Is there any chance she could still be alive? Mama Ogochi was quiet for a moment. A few years after she disappeared, someone claimed to have seen her in Lagos. She was using a different name, living a different life, but I never confirmed it. If she is alive, she has been hiding for 49 years. Faith left Umonachi village with a mission. She was going to find Chisom. She was going to bring her back, and together they would destroy the woman who had ruined both their lives. She hired a private investigator, a thorough man who specialized in finding missing persons. She gave him every detail she knew about Chisom, the physical description, the year she disappeared, the rumor that she might be in Lagos. 3 weeks later, the investigator called with news. I found her, he said. Chisom is alive. She changed her name after she fled and built a new life from nothing. She is now known as Mrs. Okunku. She runs a small provision shop in Surulere, Lagos. Faith traveled to Lagos the very next day. She found the small shop on a busy street corner in Surulere. It was a modest place, selling basic provisions and household items. An elderly woman in her mid-60s was arranging products on a shelf inside. Faith entered the shop. The elderly woman turned around, and then she froze. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared at each other. Finally, the elderly woman whispered, "You have his eyes, the Obiora eyes. I would recognize them anywhere. Who are you?" Faith felt tears streaming down her face.
My name is Faith. I am the wife of your son, Chukwuemeka. Chisom dropped the product she was holding. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her body began to tremble. My son, she breathed. My baby. He is alive. They told me he died. They told me my baby died the night he was born. Faith stepped forward and took Chisom's hands. He is alive. He is alive and well. He does not know the truth about his birth. He does not know you exist. But I know. I know everything. And I am here to bring you back to him. Chisom collapsed into Faith's arms, sobbing with 49 years of suppressed grief. When she finally calmed down enough to speak, she told Faith everything. I was 16 years old when I started working in the Obiora house. I was naive. I did not understand the ways of the world. Mr. Obiora seemed kind at first. He would give me extra money, extra food. I thought he was being generous. Her voice hardened with old pain. Then one night, he came to my room. He forced himself on me. He said if I told anyone, he would have my whole family killed. He was a powerful man. Everyone feared him. I believed his threats, so I stayed silent. She wiped her tears and continued. When I got pregnant, I was terrified. I knew the baby was his, but I could not tell anyone. When my family found out, they threw me out. I had nowhere to go. I was going to die on the streets. And then Mrs. Obiora found you, Faith said. Chisom nodded bitterly. She came to me like an angel. She said she would help me. She took me into her house and cared for me throughout the pregnancy. I was so grateful. I thought God had sent her to save me. But she had other plans. Yes, the night I gave birth, everything happened so fast. There was pain, blood, screaming, and then I heard my baby cry. I reached for him, but my arms were so weak. Someone gave me water to drink. I did not know it was drugged. Chisom's face twisted with the memory. When I woke up, I was alone in a room I did not recognize. My baby was gone. Mrs. Obiora came in and told me the baby had died during the night. She said there were complications. She said they had already buried him. You believed her? I was 16 years old, exhausted from childbirth, drugged and alone. Of course I believed her. I had no reason to think she would lie about something so terrible. Chisom explained what happened next. The Obioras gave her a small amount of money and put her on a bus to Lagos. They told her to start a new life and warned her never to return to Omunachi. They said if she ever told anyone about what happened in that house, they would find her and kill her. For 49 years, Chisom had believed her son was dead. She had mourned him. She had carried the grief every single day. She built a new life, got married to a kind man who later died, but she never had other children. The trauma was too deep. And now, sitting in her small shop with Faith, she learned that everything she believed was a lie. Her son was alive. He had been raised by the woman who stole him, and for 28 years, that same woman had been tormenting Faith to protect her secret.
Chisom's grief transformed into rage. 49 years of suppressed anger burned in her eyes. Take me to her, she said. Take me to face the woman who stole my son and destroyed my life. Faith smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who was finally about to get justice. That is exactly why I came. They traveled back together. On the long journey, Faith told Chisom everything that had happened over the past 28 years. Every humiliation, every cruel word, every sleepless night, every time she had considered taking her own life. Chisom wept and apologized as if the torment was her fault. But Faith assured her that the only person responsible was Mama Obiora. When they arrived in the village, Faith did not confront Mama Obiora immediately. She had a better plan. She wanted maximum impact. She wanted the whole family to witness the fall of the wicked woman who had ruled over them for so long. Faith told Mama Obiora that she wanted to organize a family meeting. She said she was finally ready to accept her failure and allow Chukwuemeka to take a second wife who can give us the children Faith could not provide.
Mama Obiora was overjoyed. She clapped her hands and praised God. Finally, this useless woman has accepted her fate. I will invite the whole family. Everyone must witness this glorious day. She invited all the relatives, uncles, aunties, cousins, village elders, family friends. She wanted everyone to see Faith humiliated one final time. But she did not know that Faith had her own guest list, and waiting outside the compound was Chisom, the woman Mama Obiora thought was dead. The day of the meeting arrived. The house was full of relatives. Mama Obiora sat in the center like a queen on her throne, beaming with satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming," she announced. "Today is a great day for this family. After 28 years of patience, my daughter-in-law Faith has finally accepted her failure. She has agreed to allow my son to take a second wife who can give us the children Faith could not provide." The relatives murmured their approval. Some looked at Faith with pity, others with contempt. Mama Obiora continued, "Faith, stand up and address the family. Tell them what you told me." Faith stood. The room fell silent. "Thank you, Mama Obiora. Yes, I have called this meeting because after 28 years, the truth must finally come out." Mama Obiora smiled broadly. "Yes, tell them you accept that you are barren and that my son deserves better." Faith's expression did not change. "The truth is that I was never barren." Mama Obiora's face froze. "What nonsense are you saying?" she sputtered. Faith reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of papers. "For 28 years, you gave me a fertility mixture every single morning. You told me it would help me conceive, but I had it tested at a laboratory." She held up the report for everyone to see. "This mixture contains concentrated traditional contraceptives, wild carrot, pawpaw seed extract, Queen Anne's lace. You were not helping me get pregnant, Mama Obiora. You were making absolutely sure I never would." Chaos erupted in the room. Relatives jumped to their feet. Everyone was talking at once. "What is this? Is this true? Mama Obiora, what is she saying?" Mama Obiora's face had turned grey. "She is lying. This barren woman is trying to destroy me because she has failed as a wife." But Faith was not finished. She pulled out more documents. "I also found medical records from 1975. These records show that Chukwuemeka had measles as a baby. The fever was so severe that it likely damaged his reproductive system. He may have been unable to father children since childhood." You knew this, Mama Obiora. You knew your son might not be able to have children, and yet, for 28 years, you blamed me.
Chukwuemeka stood up, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "Mother, is this true? Did you know about this?" Mama Obiora began to panic. "Chukwuemeka, my son, do not listen to her. She is full of lies and wickedness. I am your mother. I would never deceive you." Faith laughed bitterly. "You are his mother. Let us talk about that, shall we?" The room went quiet again. Everyone could sense that something even bigger was coming. Faith held up another document. "This is a medical record from 1974. It shows that you, Mama Obiora, were diagnosed as permanently barren. You cannot have children. You have never been able to have children. So tell me, if you are barren, how did you give birth to Chukwuemeka in 1975? The silence was deafening. Mama Obiora looked like she might collapse. Her secret, the secret she had protected for 49 years, was finally being dragged into the light. "That is an old record. It was wrong. The doctors made a mistake." "Did they? Then how do you explain the fact that nobody in Munachi village, where you used to live, ever saw you pregnant? How do you explain the fact that you arrived in this village already holding a baby that nobody saw you carry?" Relatives started whispering among themselves. This was news to all of them. Faith stepped forward. "Let me tell you how you got that baby. In 1975, there was a teenage girl named Chisom. She was 16 years old. She worked as a house help in your home. Your husband, Mr. Obiora, raped her repeatedly until she got pregnant. Gasps echoed through the room. When Chisom's family threw her out, you took her in. Not out of kindness, but because you wanted her baby. You kept her hidden throughout her pregnancy, and when she gave birth, you stole her child. You drugged her, told her the baby died, and sent her away with threats to keep her silent. Mama Obiora was shaking violently. Lies! All lies! She has fabricated all of this. Faith smiled coldly. Have I? Then perhaps you would like to hear the truth from someone who was there, someone you thought was dead. She walked to the door and opened it. Chisom stepped inside. The moment Mama Obiora saw her, she let out an inhuman scream. It was the sound of pure terror, the sound of a woman watching her entire world crumble. No, it cannot be. You are dead. You are supposed to be dead. Chisom walked slowly toward Mama Obiora, 49 years of pain and rage burning in her eyes. I am very much alive. I have been alive for 49 years, mourning the son you told me was dead, living in fear because you threatened to kill me if I ever spoke. She turned to look at Chukwuemeka, and her eyes filled with tears. Chukwuemeka, my son, my baby, I am your mother, your real mother. I gave birth to you when I was 16 years old. I held you in my arms for only a few hours before they drugged me and took you away. I have spent 49 years believing you were dead. Chukwuemeka staggered backward as if he had been physically struck. This cannot be true. This cannot be real. Faith stepped beside Chisom. It is true. And if you do not believe us, we can do a DNA test right now. I have already arranged for doctors to be present. We can settle this question once and for all. She looked directly at Mama Obiora. Unless, of course, you want to save us the trouble and tell the truth yourself for once in your miserable life. Mama Obiora fell to her knees. The queen had been dethroned. The lies were crumbling. She had nowhere left to hide. Chukwuemeka, she sobbed, reaching for her son. I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. I loved you. Does that not make me your mother? What does blood matter? I am your mother. Chukwuemeka stepped away from her outstretched hands. His face was twisted with confusion and betrayal. Chisom spoke again, her voice trembling. For 49 years, I lived as a ghost. I could not have other children because the trauma of losing my firstborn destroyed something inside me. I married a good man, but I could never give him children. I spent every single day of my life grieving for a baby I thought was buried in an unmarked grave in Umonachi. And all along, he was alive, living with the woman who stole him, calling her mother. She turned to the relatives who sat in stunned silence. This woman did not just steal my son. She helped cover up a crime. Her husband raped me when I was 16 years old. I was a child. And when I got pregnant from his assault, instead of protecting me, instead of giving me justice, she saw an opportunity for herself. She took my baby to save her own marriage. And to make sure I never came back to claim what was mine, her husband threatened my life. He told me that if I ever returned or ever spoke about what happened, he would kill me and my entire family. An elderly uncle stood up, his face grave. These are very serious accusations. If what you are saying is true, then Mama Obiora has committed crimes that go beyond this family. She has committed crimes against the law and against God. Faith nodded. We are prepared to involve the authorities. Let them investigate what really happened in 1975. Let them find out what happened to a 16-year-old girl who was supposed to have disappeared. Mama Obiora began to wail. Please, please, I was desperate. I had no choice. My husband would have thrown me out if I did not give him an heir. I did what I had to do to survive. Chisom's voice was ice cold.
You did what you had to do to survive. What about me? What about my survival? You took everything from me, my baby, my youth, my chance at a normal life, and you dare to ask for understanding? Chukwuemeka finally spoke. His voice was hollow, the voice of a man whose entire identity had just been shattered. All my life, you told me I was your miracle child. You said you prayed for years before God blessed you with me. Every birthday, you would tell the story of how you almost died giving birth to me. Every birthday, you would cry and thank God for your precious son. He looked at Mama Obiora with eyes full of betrayal. It was all a lie. Every single word was a lie. You are not my mother. You never were. And my wife, the woman I swore to protect and cherish, you tortured her for 28 years to keep your lie alive. He fell to his knees beside Faith. I am so sorry. I defended her. I believed her when she said you were the problem. I let her humiliate you in front of everyone. I failed you as a husband. Faith looked at the man she had loved despite everything, the man she had stood beside for 28 years despite the pain. You did fail me, she said quietly, but you were also a victim. She manipulated both of us. She made sure neither of us ever found out the truth. The DNA test was conducted the following day at a reputable hospital in the city. The doctors Faith had arranged took samples from Chukwuemeka, Chisom, and Mama Obiora. The whole family waited for the results. By evening, the results were ready. The laboratory had been paid extra for urgent processing. The doctor read the results aloud to the family. The DNA analysis confirms that Mrs. Chisom Okonkwo is the biological mother of Mr. Chukwuemeka Obiora. The probability of maternity is 99.9%. Additionally, the analysis confirms that Mrs. Obiora, the woman known as Mama Obiora, shares no genetic connection whatsoever with Mr. Chukwuemeka. They are not biologically related in any way. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mama Obiora collapsed completely. The woman who had stood so tall for so many years, who had ruled the family with fear and manipulation, was now reduced to a heap on the floor. Her entire identity had been a lie, and now everyone knew. The consequences of that day rippled outward like waves from a stone thrown into a pond. Mama Obiora was disowned by the family. The relatives who once feared and respected her now looked at her with disgust. The village that once called her a great woman now called her a criminal. A formal report was filed with the police regarding the events of 1975. An investigation was opened into the circumstances of Chisom's disappearance and the allegations against the late Mr. Obiora. Though he was already dead, the truth of his crimes would finally be recorded for history. Mama Obiora, abandoned by everyone she had ever manipulated, faced the prospect of spending her final years alone and despised. Her worst fear had come true. She had lost everything.
Chukwuemeka began the slow, painful process of rebuilding his understanding of who he was. He met with Chisom many times, listening to her stories about her life before and after his birth. He mourned the childhood they should have shared. He raged against the lie he had lived for nearly 50 years. And slowly, carefully, he rebuilt his relationship with Faith. I wasted 28 years, he told her one night. I let my mother, or the woman I thought was my mother, destroy the best thing that ever happened to me. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that I see you now. I see everything you suffered, and I am sorry. Faith listened to his words. The bitterness was still there, but so was something else. Understanding, compassion, the knowledge that he too had been a victim of Mama Obiora's wickedness. We cannot get those years back, Faith said, but we do not have to let her steal the years we have left. 1 year after the truth came out, a small ceremony was held at the Obiora compound. It was not a birthday party or a wedding celebration. It was something more meaningful. Faith and Chukwuemeka stood together, older and wounded but still standing. Beside them stood Chisom, the mother who had been lost and found, and in their arms were 2 children, a boy and a girl, twins they had adopted from an orphanage.
The children would never know their biological parents, just like Chukimeka had never known his real mother for most of his life. But they would know love, they would know truth, and they would grow up in a family that had been forged in fire and had emerged stronger. Chisom held the grandchildren she had waited 49 years for. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in decades, they were tears of joy. Faith looked at her new family and felt something she had not felt in almost 30 years: peace. They called her barren. They called her cursed. They called her worthless. But she was never the barren one. The woman with the empty womb was not the woman who could not have children. It was the woman who stole a child to fill the emptiness in her own life. It was the woman who built an empire on lies and cruelty. It was the woman who destroyed lives to protect a secret that was never hers to keep. Mama Obiora spent her final years alone, abandoned, and haunted by the ghosts of her choices. She died without reconciliation, without forgiveness, without peace. The secret she had protected for 49 years became the very thing that destroyed her. But Faith, the woman she had tried to break, survived. More than survived, Faith flourished. And every night before bed, Faith whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for revenge, though justice had certainly been served. Not for vindication, though the truth had certainly set her free. But for the simple gift of knowing that her suffering had not been in vain. Her tears had watered the ground, and from that ground, something beautiful had finally grown. This story is dedicated to every woman who has been blamed, shamed, and tormented for something that was never her fault. Your suffering is valid, your tears are not wasted, and your justice, whether in this life or the next, is surely coming. And if this story reminded you of someone still praying quietly for the fruit of the womb, or someone suffering unjustly in the hands of in-laws for a child they cannot create, please share this story with them. Sometimes a story like this can remind someone that they are not cursed, not alone, and not forgotten. But I want to ask you something. After everything Faith went through for 28 years, the humiliation, the lies, the suffering, do you think she should have stayed in that marriage after discovering the truth? Or would you have walked away? Tell me what you think in the comments. I would really love to hear your thoughts. And if stories like this speak to your heart, you can also like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us that truth, justice, and hope always find their way back. Because sometimes the truth may take years to rise, but when it finally does, it changes everything.